Laziness was never treated as a flaw by the samurai. It was treated as a threat. Not a moral weakness, not a lack of motivation, but a silent erosion of presence. Something that hollowed the spirit long before it touched the body. A samurai did not wait to feel ready. Waiting was already decay. The moment the mind drifted toward comfort, the discipline tightened. Not through force, but through clarity. Every action was either sharpening the blade or letting it rust. There was no neutral ground. In modern life, laziness disguises itself as rest, distraction, or endless preparation. It feels harmless. But the samurai understood something deeper. What weakens you is not effort, but hesitation. Not fatigue, but delay. The enemy was never outside the gates. It lived in the pause between intention and action. They trained before sunrise not to prove toughness, but to remove choice. When there is no debate, there is no laziness. When the body moves before the mind complains, resistance dissolves. This was not about willpower. It was about identity. A samurai did not ask if he felt like acting. He acted because that was who he was. Some truths only reveal themselves when you stop negotiating with yourself. Chapter 1: The Awakening. The samurai woke before the sun not because it was heroic, but because the dark revealed patterns the daylight hid. In the half-lit hours, the mind exposed its habits. Hesitation appeared clearly. Comfort whispered louder. The body asked for delay. This was where laziness showed its true face, not as sleep, but as avoidance of the first movement. Each morning repeated the same test. The sword lay still. The floor was cold. The silence pressed inward. Nothing forced action except the awareness that postponement weakened the edge within. The samurai understood that laziness did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated through small permissions. Just a moment more. Just one exception. Just the day. This is how the cycle formed. Intention rose with clarity, then dissolved in negotiation. The mind searched for reasons. The body followed. Over time, the gap between knowing and doing widened, and identity eroded quietly. The samurai named this erosion spiritual rust. To awaken meant to see the cycle without drama. No self-hatred. No excuses. Only recognition. When action was delayed, it was not because the task was heavy, but because the self had split. One part knew the path. The other sought safety. Laziness lived in that fracture. Training was designed to close it. Repetition was not about mastery of technique, but mastery of response. When the signal came, the body moved. Thought followed later. This was the reversal that ended inner debate. Action first. Explanation second. In modern terms, the samurai were training the nervous system. They reduced uncertainty. Predictability replaced motivation. When behavior became automatic, laziness lost its leverage. There was nothing to argue with. A man who waits to feel aligned will always be late. A man who acts aligns himself through motion. The awakening was not dramatic. It was quiet. A recognition that every delay reshaped the self. Every avoided action trained avoidance. Every completed action strengthened presence. Some mornings, the body resisted. That resistance was not an enemy. It was information. It revealed where discipline was required, not punishment. The samurai bowed to the resistance and moved anyway. Once this pattern was seen, it could not be unseen. The cycle either continued unconsciously, or it was broken deliberately. And from that moment, the day was already decided. Chapter 2: The Ancient Principle. The principle the samurai lived by was simple and severe. Do not leave space for inner argument. In Zen monasteries, this was expressed through form. Bowing, walking, eating, cleaning. Each movement had shape. Structure removed choice. Choice invited hesitation. Hesitation fed laziness. This principle was never explained as philosophy. It was embodied. When the bell rang, the body stood. When training began, the hands moved. The mind was not consulted. Over time, the mind learned to follow instead of interfere. Modern psychology now names this mechanism. Decision fatigue weakens follow-through. Each choice drains energy. The samurai eliminated unnecessary decisions so energy could be spent on execution. What appears rigid was actually merciful. Neuroscience confirms what the ancients practiced. Habits stored in deeper brain circuits bypass conscious resistance. Repetition creates pathways that do not require motivation. Once behavior becomes identity, effort dissolves. The samurai did not say I must train today. He said I train. Language reflected reality. Identity preceded emotion. This inversion destroyed laziness at its root because laziness depends on conditional action. If I feel like it. If the conditions are right. The ancient principle refused conditions. In monasteries, novices swept the same path every day. Not because it became dirty, but because the self did. Each sweep restored order internally. Discipline was hygiene for the mind. There is a moment when understanding shifts from intellectual to cellular. You recognize that freedom is not the absence of rules, but the absence of internal conflict. This is where many turn back. Structure feels restrictive to a mind addicted to choice. But the samurai saw further. Without structure, the mind fractures under endless options. Laziness thrives in that chaos. When form is accepted, energy returns. Attention sharpens. Action becomes clean. The principle was never about harshness. It was about alignment. When outer structure matched inner intention, resistance vanished. Those who live this way stop asking how to stay disciplined. The question no longer makes sense. They move, and the mind follows. Chapter 3, The Internal War. Laziness is not a lack of energy. It is a misfiring signal. The samurai understood this long before science named it. Inside the body, two forces competed. One sought preservation. The other demanded growth. When danger was unclear, preservation spoke louder. This was the internal war. The nervous system evolved to conserve resources. Any unfamiliar effort registered as risk. The heart slowed initiative. The mind produced doubt. This was not weakness. It was biology doing its job. Most people mistake this signal for truth. The samurai did not. They trained to recognize resistance as a threshold, not a verdict. When the body tightened, it meant the edge was near. Laziness thrived when that signal was obeyed without question. Discipline emerged when it was observed without surrender. Fear disguised itself as logic. The mind generated stories about timing, readiness, and efficiency. None were real. They were protective illusions meant to keep the system stable. The samurai learned to let these thoughts pass like wind through an open gate. Breath was the first weapon. Long exhales softened the alarm. Posture followed. When the spine aligned, the nervous system shifted from defense to readiness. Action became possible again. Modern science confirms this sequence. The body leads. The mind follows. When movement begins, threat perception decreases. Momentum overrides hesitation. This is why waiting to feel motivated fails. Motivation is the result, not the cause. There was a moment in every training session when the urge to stop peaked. Muscles burned. Focus wavered. This was the crossing. If the samurai continued, something subtle changed. The struggle dissolved into rhythm. Effort became flow. That moment is where laziness dies or survives. Most stop there and call it wisdom. The samurai moved through and called it clarity. This understanding changes how one relates to resistance. It is no longer personal. It is procedural. A signal to proceed calmly, not to retreat. There is a quiet point when you realize the battle was never with effort, but with interpretation. From there, the war becomes brief. The body resists. You move anyway. The mind learns there is no negotiation. Peace follows obedience to what must be done. Chapter 4, The System. The samurai did not rely on courage. Courage fluctuates. They relied on systems. A system removes emotion from decision-making. It transforms intention into structure. Every day followed form. Wake. Clean. Train. Eat. Reflect. Repeat. Not because creativity was rejected, but because consistency was sacred. When the sequence was fixed, laziness had nowhere to enter. Rules were few and non-negotiable. Training occurred regardless of weather or mood. Equipment was maintained daily. Movements were practiced even when mastery was achieved. This was not obsession. It was identity reinforcement. A system works because it shifts the question. Instead of asking "should I act?" the question becomes "what is next?" The former invites debate. The latter invites movement. There is a moment when this truth settles quietly. Modern behavior science echoes this ancient design. Environment shapes behavior more than intention. The samurai arranged their world to make discipline inevitable. The sword was visible. The floor was clear. Distraction was removed. Action became the path of least resistance. They did not attempt to defeat laziness directly. They made laziness inconvenient. Time was also structured. Training began at the same hour daily. The body adapted. Hormones aligned. Energy arrived on schedule. What looked like iron will was biological alignment. The system included recovery. Rest was deliberate, not accidental. Sleep was protected. Meals were simple. This prevented burnout, which often masquerades as laziness. The samurai distinguished between true fatigue and avoidance. One required rest. The other required movement. Identity was reinforced through ritual. Bowing before practice was not symbolic. It marked a transition from ordinary self to disciplined self. The mind learned to switch states on command. Over time, effort decreased. Action became automatic. Laziness lost its narrative power because the system spoke louder. When discipline becomes structural, the self no longer carries the burden. You move because the path is already set. And in that movement, a quieter strength takes root. Chapter 5, Practice Without Gaps. The samurai did not believe in perfect days. They believed in unbroken days. Practice was not measured by intensity, but by continuity. Missing once was not failure. Missing twice was the beginning of a new identity. This is where most discipline collapses. People aim for heroic effort, then disappear when energy fades. The samurai aimed lower and deeper. They practiced even when the session felt thin. Especially then. A shortened practice was still practice. A tired strike was still a strike. The rule was simple. Do not create gaps. Gaps invite stories. Stories invite exceptions. Exceptions multiply. The body does not remember intention. It remembers repetition. When illness came, the practice adapted. When travel disrupted routine, form was simplified. When exhaustion arrived, movements slowed but did not vanish. The shape remained even when strength did not. This protected identity. There is a dangerous myth that discipline requires force. Force creates backlash. The samurai used continuity instead. They trusted accumulation. A single drop does nothing. A river carves stone. This approach dissolved the all-or-nothing trap. There was no restarting, because nothing had stopped. Momentum stayed alive, even at its quietest. In modern language, this preserves neural pathways. Consistency keeps circuits warm. When behavior disappears, the brain reallocates resources. Restarting then feels heavy. The samurai avoided this cost entirely. There was a quiet understanding that effort fluctuates but standards do not. You show up as you are, not as you wish to be. This honesty removed shame. Shame feeds laziness. Neutral presence starves it. There were days when the body resisted strongly. On those days, the practice became smaller, not absent. One form. One breath. One cut. This was enough to signal continuity. Something subtle happens when gaps disappear. Self-trust returns. You no longer question whether you will act. You already know the answer. The mind relaxes. At this point, discipline stops feeling like discipline. This is the quiet transition many never reach. When action becomes inevitable, laziness loses its identity. It cannot attach to someone who never negotiates with absence. The samurai did not chase motivation. They built a life where showing up was normal. Over time, effort softened into presence. Practice became a place of return, not a test. And this is where the root was cut. Not through intensity. Not through punishment. But through the refusal to disappear. Chapter 6, Identity Collapse. There comes a point when discipline no longer feels like a practice. It begins to threaten the old self. This is where many retreat. The samurai did not. As continuity hardened, an inner fracture appeared. The part that survived on excuses weakened. The part that acted without negotiation grew heavier, quieter, undeniable. The mind sensed loss. Old identities do not vanish politely. They resist. This was the collapse. The samurai experienced moments of emptiness. Not exhaustion, but disorientation. The habits that once filled time no longer fit. Distraction lost flavor. Comfort felt shallow. There was nothing wrong, yet something familiar was gone. This is where laziness makes its final stand. It offers nostalgia. It recalls the ease of postponement, the pleasure of drifting. It asks whether this new way is too severe, too narrow, too lonely. The samurai recognized this voice. It was the echo of a self that no longer served. They did not argue with it. Argument grants dignity. They continued. Identity collapse is not dramatic. It is subtle and uncomfortable. You realize you can no longer return to the old rhythm without feeling false. At the same time, the new identity has not fully settled. You stand between worlds. This is a dangerous place. Many soften their standards here and call it balance. The samurai understood that this phase required steadiness, not adjustment. The system remained unchanged. Practice continued without commentary. Structure held while identity reorganized. Psychologically, this is integration. Neural patterns are rewiring. The brain resists because uncertainty feels unsafe. But safety is no longer the goal. Coherence is. During this phase, effort can briefly increase. Not because tasks are harder, but because the old self is dissolving. Emotions fluctuate. Confidence thins. Discipline must be impersonal here. If it becomes emotional, it collapses with the self. The samurai leaned into ritual. Bowing. Cleaning. Repetition. These acts grounded them when identity felt fluid. Action anchored what thought could not. Then something shifts. You notice silence where resistance used to live. The urge to delay no longer arises as a debate. It appears faintly, then passes. The body moves without asking permission. The mind follows without protest. This is not victory. It is replacement. The lazy self did not improve. It expired. And what remains does not call itself disciplined. It simply acts. From here, the path no longer feels narrow. It feels inevitable. Chapter 7, Transformation. Transformation did not arrive as triumph. It arrived as quiet normality. The samurai did not wake one day feeling powerful. He woke feeling clear. Action no longer required preparation. There was no inner speech asking whether to begin. The body moved, and the day unfolded. This is the final outcome of destroying laziness at the root. Not endless discipline, but the absence of friction. What changed was not behavior, but self-perception. The samurai no longer saw himself as someone who tries. He became someone who does. This distinction is subtle and absolute. Trying leaves room for escape. Doing does not. In this state, effort feels different. There is still strain, still fatigue, still resistance at times. But none of it threatens identity. Discomfort becomes part of the terrain, not a signal to stop. Laziness loses its voice because it no longer fits the story of who you are. Neuroscience would say the circuits are stable now. Psychology would say habits have become traits. Zen would say the self has thinned. All are pointing to the same truth. When action and identity align, willpower becomes irrelevant. The samurai no longer managed his behavior. He expressed it. Training was not a task to complete, but a way of standing in the world. Even rest carried intention. Even stillness had shape. This is where freedom appears, unexpectedly. Not the freedom to choose endlessly, but the freedom from choosing at all. Life simplifies. Energy returns. Attention sharpens. You stop asking how to stay disciplined. The question dissolves. There is also humility here. The samurai did not believe he had conquered laziness forever. He knew vigilance was quiet, not aggressive. The system remained. Practice continued. Gaps were still avoided. Not out of fear, but out of respect for the path. Transformation is not becoming exceptional. It is becoming consistent. The old self, once loud and demanding, feels distant. Not hated. Not corrected. Simply outgrown. You realize then that laziness was never the enemy. It was a signal of misalignment. When identity, structure, and action came into coherence, the signal disappeared. This is the final teaching. Do not fight what you can replace. When you live this way, others may call you disciplined. You will not recognize the word. You will only recognize the feeling of moving without resistance. And a quiet question remains, waiting without urgency. Who would you become if absence was no longer an option? The path does not announce itself. It simply continues, step after step. Conclusion. The samurai did not destroy laziness by attacking it. They outlived it. What vanished was not a habit, but a way of relating to oneself. Laziness survives on delay, negotiation, and self-division. When those disappear, it has nothing to attach to. What remains after this path is not hardness. It is simplicity. Life becomes quieter because fewer inner voices compete for control. Action is no longer a performance of strength, but an expression of alignment. You do what must be done because there is no longer a reason not to. This is the deeper lesson most overlook. Discipline is not about forcing the body to obey the mind. It is about designing a life where obedience is unnecessary. Structure replaces motivation. Continuity replaces intensity. Identity replaces effort. The samurai trusted this process more than emotion. They knew feelings change faster than character. By removing gaps, they removed the opportunity for erosion. By practicing without drama, they preserved clarity. By letting the old self collapse, they made space for something quieter and stronger. Modern life offers endless tools to avoid effort while feeling productive. The samurai path offers something more demanding and more freeing. It asks for fewer choices, fewer excuses, fewer stories. In return, it gives coherence. When action becomes inevitable, peace follows. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of knowing there is no contradiction between what you value and what you do. This is not a path for everyone. It narrows the field. It removes illusions gently but permanently. Once seen, the old negotiations feel hollow. Once lived, the old delays feel foreign. Laziness does not need to be defeated daily. It needs to be made irrelevant. The samurai showed that when you stop disappearing from your own life, strength no longer feels heavy. It feels normal. And when normal changes, destiny follows quietly behind. Some paths do not promise ease. They promise integrity. And that promise, once kept long enough, begins to keep you.